Hello and welcome to this Robocraft 2 video. Robocraft 2 is in very early alpha, so everything I say in this video might not be true if you happen to watch this from the future. This video will probably have kind of the most clickbait title that I've done so far, but it's not clickbait if it's true, right? So towards the second half of this video, I will talk about like a new way of making armor. I haven't seen anyone do it so far, and it's a lot stronger than just stacking plates. But before that, or leading up to that, I will talk about some different armor technique that used to be good and doesn't work, and some armor technique that people have discussed that I will show why they're not really that good, right? But first I will talk about this type of armor technique. Like, this is a bit exaggerated and it's leaving spacing in the armor or air pockets, right? It used to be really good against plasma, but with the latest changes of how plasma works, or how any projectile based weapon works in Robocraft, this is now really bad, and I will show why. Why this used to be good is because the air pockets here made the impact from plasma happen further away, and because there was kind of an AoE effect, or like a big circle where plasma did damage, this kind of helped having fewer connection taking that damage. But that's not how plasma works right now. So if we compare these two, you can see that here we still have one layer, and here all layers are gone. And the reason for that is now what happens when a projectile of plasma hits, it fires 10 scrap nails or smaller projectiles in different directions, and these connections are simply worse than these connections. So in short, don't do air pockets. It doesn't help, it just makes your build weaker. The second thing that you should not do, that I've heard people talk about, is angled armor. And the reason for that is how the new penetration system works. It actually matters how far, well, we'll see it better from here, how far something will travel, because it will lose, the further it travels through the material, the more energy it will lose, and the less damage it will do to something behind the material it hits. And of course, if a material is hit at an angle like this, it will have further to travel than if it just hits something that is straight like this, right? So this one, if it hits from this angle straight across, will have a shorter distance to travel than if it hits at an angle diagonally like this, right? So people have talked about like using hinges, or maybe this type of different plates to get angled armor. But here's the thing, right? If you want to cover a specific amount or a specific area of your robot with armor, so this distance here is a lot larger than this distance here. That's actually exactly the same relation. So like, in order for it to travel longer here, this one must be just as much larger. So you will get as much extra mass as if you just do like a boring solution where you add the mass here, instead of, if you do it diagonally, you essentially like add mass here and then angle this plate instead of just adding mass to the front, and like the result is the same. So you just create complications without any real gains, plus the connection points of plates like this are a lot worse than the connection points of plates like this. And if you're gonna angle it using hinges, you have to use CPU for the hinges, so that's also worse because you're using something for nothing. So don't do this either, right? It's actually easy to kind of sometimes forget about collision, because there's laser and there's plasma right now as weapons in Robocraft 2, but it's also collision based damage that is really important, especially people using melee weapons. So a very interesting thing is, how well does armor withstand collision? So this is with stacked plates, and we'll have to do a bunch of collisions here. So we lost a quite substantial amount of these stacked plates with every collision. Let's instead try a bit of thicker connections. So let's remove these ones here, and we'll put the thicker plates on here. So collision based tests are not as exact, I guess, as when shooting at something, because it depends a lot on the speed at which you hit something, the angle at which you hit something, stuff like that. And it's really hard to replicate, especially if you want to try against the robots that actually are moving down there. But what we can see from comparing stacked plates and thicker stacked plates is that the thicker ones hold up really well compared to their CPU cost, because we lost a bunch of the thinner stacked plates with every collision here, while only losing like one of the thicker ones. One thing regarding collision damage is that how small the impact point is does not really seem to matter in regards to how much damage the connection takes. So trying to use kind of small connections for impact damage, at least when it comes to like or impact armor in terms of defending yourself against different types of collisions, it's worthless. It doesn't work. They will break so easily. So don't use that. So we know that this almost got the same strength as this. It's close to 90% as effective against laser and roughly 80% as effective against plasma, despite only costing a third of the CPU. So it scales like when we talk about Arium in this case, it scales extremely well with thickness. So another thing we know is that because of that, the base damage or base health. So another thing we know is that because of that, base health is based on perimeter rather than area. So the base strength for all of these would be 3 plus 9, that's 12. So 36 in total compared to 18 for, let's make this a bit clearer for this connection, right? So the total health here would be the double. Of course, like if someone would hit the same place over and over, it wouldn't hold up as good. But realistically, if you kind of layer this type of armor, shots should spread out. So even though you might not get twice the protection, you should get a lot more protection. Now adding this together, that like something that is thicker is really great scaling for Arium, compared with the fact that making smaller connections add health, there's actually something really interesting here. So let's go to another build where I combined it. So combined, it can look something like this. The extra CPU cost from having more sections here, I make up for by having broader connections. So these two parts of armor are actually the exact same amount of CPU, 21 each, exact same weight and exact same size. We'll test the traditional armor first. 1, 2, 3, and it's all gone. Now let's test the new brick forest armor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's gone. Now you might have noticed I didn't hit the exact same spot all the time, but realistically you will be moving in combat and your enemy will be moving as well, so no one will be able to hit the exact same spot all the time. Even if you do hit the exact same spot all the time, it still holds up better. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just not as big of a difference as when the hits are a bit more spread out. Against plasma, it's however not as conclusive of a win. I've tested several times. Sometimes the traditional plate stacking do a bit better, sometimes the new brick forest armor do better, but at least it's not worse, it's pretty much the same. So the fact it does a lot better against laser and it's just inconclusive, it's not worse when it comes to defending against plasma. The fact it is so much better protecting against laser and not worse, just inconclusive against plasma, means it's a clear winner. The thicker material, as shown in previous tests, also handle collision very well. It all comes down to our protection or HP scale with the thicker material. Against high level energy weapons like laser, it scales really well with the thicker material, not so much against low level energy weapons like plasma. Past a certain thickness, it does not scale at all. There's also a kind of built-in redundancy. If we look at this traditional stacked plates, if one of these plates get hit, you would lose the whole stack in front, unless you actually have something on the top and bottom, and that would cost extra CPU, extra weight. Well, this kind of brick forcing got an inbuilt redundancy. Like if you hit and lose one of these bricks down here, it doesn't matter. You won't lose the whole slab in front of it. So it handles collision from below a lot better. Here you could have like really bad luck and hit something below the robot, lose this brick here, and poof, all your armor in front is gone, right? So I think we can safely say the new meta for armor is not any more plate stacking, it's brick forcing. Hope you enjoyed this video. Give a thumbs up if you liked it. Maybe considering subscribing. I'm not usually asking for subscriptions, but I think this is kind of a neat thing to share with you, and actually an overall improvement on how people armor their vehicles. So if it's any time to ask people, it's now, I guess. Well, cheers.